Welcome to the Mind Body Business Show. The 3 keys to your success is just moments away. Here's your host, Brian Kelly.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Mind Body Business Show. We're so glad you could make it. Come on with us. This is going to be an amazing show. I have an amazing special guest expert with me tonight. He is sitting right in front of me on camera. You can't see him yet. He's going to come on here in just a moment. Angel Iscovich. I think I said that correctly or close to correctly. I'll practice more through the night. Thanks for coming on. And while you're here, be sure to like, love, share this show, depending on where you're watching it. You might be on Facebook. You might be on Periscope. You might even be watching on Roku or Amazon Fire after the recording is done, after the live show. Or you may be listening on a podcast. Whatever the case may be, show us some love, give us some stars, give us some feedback and reviews. We would greatly appreciate that so we can spread the good news of this show farther, because people like Angel have a lot to give, a lot. And you're going to be blown away with this man's expertise, his genius mind, and what he's working on right now. Was just talking to him moments ago. I'm really excited about this. The Mind Body Business Show. What does that mean? What is that all about? Well, in my now 54 years on this planet, I began focusing on people that were successful. And what I noticed over time, I've been going through seminars, I've spoken from stage, I've trained from stage, I've done my own seminars. And what I learned over this journey is that there were 3 things that kept cropping up that seemed to be common between all successful people. And what I realized were those 3 areas were, what are the title of this show? Mind. Mindset is really what that stands for. And that's really developing a proven, rock-solid mindset from the subconscious portion of our brain, which is even more powerful and more important than our conscious part of our brain. And we can go in deeper to that, and we have a perfect guest to discuss things about what are going on inside of our noggins tonight. We may or may not go down that path. It will all depend. And then body. Body, that is about literally the body, about your body, about taking care of it by exercising, by eating well, drinking well. And the thing is, what I like to say is the mind and body are a team. And even more importantly, the mind and body are your team. And that's the thing. What if you have a team, a sport? There's a team of 5 players on basketball, for instance, and one of the players that's starting, he's a starting player, he plays in the beginning of the game, he decided not to take care of himself in the off season, in the summer maybe, and did not really eat well, didn't keep exercising, and didn't feed his mind the things that needed to be fed. And then when they take the floor for the first time that next season, the other 4 are ready to go. They're in prime condition. What happens to the team as a whole when you just have one team member that is not operating at a peak level of performance? You guessed it. It's not going to work out as well as it would if he was ready. It's kind of like a tripod. You have 3 legs, mind, body, and business, and you kick one of those legs away. What happens to the tripod? It comes tumbling down, doesn't it? And so that's what the purpose of this show is to bring on super successful people like Angel, who is going to show you ways that will make you think and help you to get down the road of success a little farther, a little faster, and a little easier as well. And so I'm really excited to bring him on. And interesting thing about success, a little side story is that I remember some time ago, this is years and years ago, I was actually invited to come to the East Coast. I live in the West Coast. I was flown out there. They paid my ticket, had me picked up in a limo, and I went to meet a CEO of a company for a deal, for a contract. And I was there for 2 days in his office, very large corner office, of course, a very successful gentleman. And I remember on the second day, I was sitting on the couch, and he was just standing casually. We were chatting, and he's looking at me, and he says, Brian, it's interesting. If people only knew, if they just did this one thing, they'd all be super rich. And then he kind of stopped talking. I'm like, okay, what is it? At that moment, he kind of coyly turned, walked away from me toward the back wall, and there was, from floor to ceiling, a very large 2-door cabinet. And he looked back at me, grabbed both handles, and swung open the doors to reveal the secret. And what I saw was very similar to what you see behind me right now. It was shelf after shelf after shelf of books. And we're not talking just any kind of books. We're talking about self-help, personal development. We're talking about mindset. We're talking about fitness books. We're talking about business books, sales, marketing, team building. And it was just a completely just comprehensive library. And by the way, that is the business part of Mind Body Business, is sales, marketing, team building, systematizing, everything that goes into building a business. And the thing is, if you master just one area, mind, body, or business, then your life will improve for sure. But imagine once you've mastered all three. That is when you become a very successful individual, like our guest expert who's coming on in just a moment. And so he showed me that was a secret to becoming rich. In my translation is to becoming successful. And I did a really, really dumb thing. I ignored him. I ignored that advice. I said, it can't be that easy. Nothing's that easy. Come on. You can't just read. And, you can go to a library and get these books. Don't even have to pay for the darn things. There's no skin in the game. How could this be the secret to becoming successful? So I didn't read for years. Then, thankfully, many years later, I met another gentleman and ended up working with this gentleman. He became my mentor. He's one of the folks that I spoke from his stage, training his students for a couple of years. And one time I was in his house and he's walking around with headphones. And I said, "Hey man, what are you doing?" He goes, What this?" He goes, "Yeah, I'm listening to a book." And this was still several years ago. And I'm like, listen to a book? What? What's that? And so he explained it was through an app that he was using called Audible. And I thought, wow. The thing is, whenever I read a physical book, I didn't even realize this till I started listening, but when I read a book, my eyes fatigue and I get tired and I thought I was getting bored, but I was really just fatiguing. And I thought, I'm going to give this a shot. So I started listening to a book and I thought, wow, I love this. I'm not getting tired. I can listen. I can hear it. I can do this in my car. What else would you do in a car that could be productive? Yeah, sometimes I listen to music to relax, but most of the time I'm listening to a book. So I've gone through many books and the car is my primary library. It's awesome. And the beautiful thing with Audible, as I'm listening, it provides this little icon. It's called a bookmark. And as I'm listening, if something catches my ear that I really want to go back and revisit, or it just was profound, I just tap it, quick, instant. And so I began doing that. And I read voraciously from that point forward. And I've put together quite a compilation of books. And what I want to do is transition over into a section of the show I'll call, well, you guessed it, bookmarks.
Bookmarks. Born to read. Bookmarks. Ready, steady, read. Bookmarks. Brought to you by reachyourpeaklibrary.com.
Yes, reachyourpeaklibrary.com, and please, by all means, write this information down. In other words, stay with us on this show, whether you're watching it live right now or recorded later. Stay with us, take notes, and go visit these resources at a later time because you do not want to miss 1 minute of Dr. I, that's Angel Iscovich, that's coming on very, very soon. I promise, it's very soon. Real quick, reachyourpeaklibrary.com. That is a website I personally developed, and I did it for one person in mind, and that was you, the viewer, the listener. It's a gift, and what it is, my gift to you. What it is a compilation. It contains a compilation of the books I've read that have had a profound impact on me. And that's one of the beautiful things about having a website where you can just give this stuff to people. And it's amazing that I can do this, and I love doing this. And what I do is I store bookmarks. And what we're going to do, I normally play back a bookmark audibly on every show. But you know what? After talking to Angel, I want to give him more time to be on this show, and I want you to get more of his value. So we're going to do something interesting, and I'm going to move past that. It's really, I play a 1 minute snippet on bookmarks that I play out loud for a guest or for you, the listener. Tonight we're gonna change things up, and let's jump into bringing on our special guest expert right after you write down reachyourpeaklibrary.com. Go there, pick whatever book you find, the first one that jumps off the page, pick it. Don't go sifting through 20 of them or 40 of them. There's over 40 on there. The first one, because you'll spend too much time in getting into paralysis by analysis. The first one, pick it, read it. And there are all sorts of forms of books in there. There's physical, there's Kindle, and there are Audible. Without further ado, let's do this, shall we? Let's bring on our special guest expert.
It's time for the Guest Expert Spotlight. Savvy, skillful, professional, adept, trained, big league, qualified.
And there he is, ladies and gentlemen. The man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Angel Iscovich, Dr. I. How are you doing, my friend?
Good, thank you. What a pleasure.
Man, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on. We're going to give everyone a quick introduction of you, and then we'll jump into it. Does that sound good?
Oh, great.
Right on. Dr. Angel Iscovich is, or AKA Dr. I, was born in Buenos Aires, nice, Argentina, to survivors from World War II. Wow. Dr. I grew up in the shadow of this devastating conflict. Though he and family struggled with little to call their own, he immigrated to the U.S., where he graduated with a B.A. in philosophy, summa cum laude, from the University of Puget Sound before matriculating to the University of California, San Francisco School of Medicine, and obtaining his postgraduate training in psychiatry. Oh, what a mix. I'm loving this. His interest in leadership, organizational development, and strategy led him to C-suite positions in the corporate healthcare sector, as well as chairing Direct Relief, the top-rated charity in the U.S. Such broad experience affords Dr. I with a unique view into human behavior. Hint, hint, wink, wink, we might be talking about that. Aiding in his continual search for meaning and purpose in our lives. And that is the subject of his new book, Routineology, The Lost Art and Science of Routine. And real quick before we jump in and give the con over to Dr. I, so to speak, I want to remind everyone that's watching live right now, stay on to the end and you will have the opportunity to win a 5-night stay at a, you guessed it, 5-star luxury resort in Mexico. Compliments of my good buddies over at powertexting.com. You want to write that one down too. Powertexting.com. All right, now to the man of the hour. Dr. I, love having you here. It was a phenomenal background on you that we just read. And what I'd like to do is, if you don't mind, is go a little bit deeper into what makes you tick. And so on that note, like everyone gets up in the morning and, our feet hit the floor. I know when I do it, I'm very groggy. But at that moment, successful people like yourself and myself, we have something that motivates us, something that drives us, that says, okay, now I'm coming to consciousness, I'm ready, let's go take on the day. For you, what is that thing or things that motivate and drive you to take on each and every day?
Wow, that's a complex question. Thank you, Brian. But it's really what I'm talking about in my book. But really for myself, I've had a sense of being a caregiver. That's really what I've have in my life, and it's to do some good and really to wake up with every day to try to have some meaning and purpose. And that's really why routine and having a stable environment is so important. And that's what I speak to in our book and to a number of audiences in the sort.
Love it, love it, love it. There we go. So, there are many things I like to dig into on this book that you're writing. It sounds very intriguing. We were talking just before we got started here off camera, and I was really leaning forward, listening, because it sounds extremely just intriguing to me. So you're a successful gentleman. You know what? What I'd like to do is back up a moment. Would you mind telling us a quick story about yourself, your career path, and where it led you to today? Because sure. I found that was very, very interesting as well.
I early on in college, I became interested in philosophy, and then kind of moved on from there to medicine. There was something about the science. My interest was early on in neurology and in psychiatry, and medicine is quite an art. I was really honored to really be able to have that privilege to take care of patients, take care of people, and really got a good sense of how important that is in becoming meaningful and purposeful really in life. And I started in psychiatry, and then I had kind of a real attraction early on to what became the growing field of emergency medicine. And I became very interested and began to practice as an emergency physician, sort of understanding how we kind of developed routines and how we developed cultures within our emergency department to take care of the uncertainty of those things that might come in, and at the same time see how people can be distressed, and where behavior really is and what stresses us as humans, and the sort. So I did that, and at the time there was kind of an entrepreneurial opportunity that just came to me, where a number of hospitals and emergency departments asked me to staff the emergency departments with qualified emergency physicians, people that were experts in trauma care and cardiac care. And from that, the nature of emergency physicians is they kind of want to put a white coat on, a stethoscope, and go to work. So there's a business there, a business of insuring, contracting, billing for services and the sort. And from that, I developed a physician management service that then went on, and I was acquired by a larger group to try to help expand, which took me into the corporate world and eventually to operating $1 billion segment of a healthcare company. So that's what I've done. But all along the way, I've enjoyed being a leader, and I've really enjoyed my time most recently with direct relief and in the humanitarian world. So that's a little bit of my history.
Love it, and I appreciate that you went from full circle all the way back to corporate, and now an author in the makes. Looking forward to that book when it comes out. Definitely, let's give a shout out when that's completed, maybe a little later in the year, as I understand it. And speaking of books, and I think I know the answer to this one already, but I really am curious about this. Would you consider yourself to be an avid reader? And if so, or even if not, what book, what was your last book you read, or maybe one that really funnels to the top?
Currently, I'm kind of pulling on my philosophy strings recently, and kind of a little bit on physics, and I actually brought it here because I was actually reading a little earlier today, because that's the time that I read. Again, routine, how you do things regularly, is very important, and that's part of really being a good reader, and being able to have that time where you can really work on reading and what it does for you. But God's Equation, actually, Amir Axel, it's actually about Einstein, relativity, and the expanding universe, and probably a little more than some of your viewers might think of. But to me, it's kind of important, because that's what I'm really talking about. I'm talking about routine, importance of regularity, how we're wired that way from the time we come out of the womb, and what does time really mean, and how is it that we act upon it every day regularly, and the sort. So that's one of the books I'm reading today.
Fantastic. Yeah, and I love this whole concept of routine and regularity. We often talk about that in entrepreneur circles, and our term for it is the comfort zone. And we talk about the more often we can basically nudge ourselves to get out of that comfort zone on a more regular basis. That's really the only time we grow as business owners, and really as people, because when you get stuck in a routine, you really are going nowhere farther than you are today. You're just going to stay where you're at if you don't step out and do something slightly different on a regular basis. What's your take on something like that?
Well, it's interesting, because if you look at circadian rhythms, the way we work through the day, and how cortisol levels, and I get to a little bit to the science of it, and how we have those downers at 3 o'clock, where the English have tea, and most of us often here in the United States go out to Starbucks, and the Spanish cultures go to sleep. This is all monitored by the hypothalamus and how your brain works. So truly, what's important about routine is that it's regularity, and also that you do this in a stable environment. But the content of what you do in a routine, which is what I call a time bubble. Essentially, we were kind of born in a womb, a sort of a bubble, of a protective bubble, that actually we have quite a bit of routine that goes on. And, I kind of learned this early by studying people that were over 100 years old. You see this in what happens in care of the young. You see this in high performers, how organized and how things happen on a very regular basis. But you're right about the need to grow. When the content of the routine isn't correct, you have to change it. And this is what I call a little time bubble. We're kind of in a little time bubble, and we go through life kind of exploding our time bubbles and recreating them by nature. So when you talk about that growth, that's right. External and internal forces often break our time bubbles, and then now we have that by nature creation of a new bubble, a new time, new routines, which allows to grow and become successful.
Fantastic. Yeah, I was writing notes myself. So for those of you watching, lead by example. I love it. So it made me think, Dr. I, that there might be, so I kind of translated so that our listeners could get a better feel that it's really comfort zone that we're talking about in ways, and then routine. Routine is actually very, very necessary, isn't it? It's very necessary, especially when you're in business. And another word that comes to my mind when it comes to routine for succeeding in a business is the word discipline, to be disciplined. Just like you carve out time in a disciplined manner to read, which helps you to propel yourself farther. That's also important. So there's this balance between, getting out of the comfort zone and maintaining at the same time the discipline or routine required to get us to that next level. Does that resonate?
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct, Brian. It's very interesting when you look at either neuroscience or studies or observe people, how routine in itself, just accomplishing something, gives us meaning and purpose. Mm-hmm. Even though you might not be running a big business or doing a small task, in itself it gives meaning and purpose. And the way the brain works, it kind of gives you a reward. Your dopamine levels go up. It creates a mood. And I've talked to some very interesting people throughout, and you just would be amazed how to perform at a high level, let's say in business or a creative piece, how important routine, structure, and a stable environment really is. And so I don't know if I call that exactly a comfort zone, but one can change the routine and what one does. And one of the stories I love telling is about the Rolling Stones, who we interviewed in our book. And wouldn't you know it, all septuagenarians, over 7 years old, touring for the last 55 years in a very creative rock environment. And the thing that's most amazing is how incredibly organized, structured, routine they are, and how important having a stable environment for them to perform actually is. Each of their backstages at all of their venues are exactly the same, Brian. They from where things are to even the scent of how things smell. In the stage itself, things are marked exactly to where they need to be, where the waters will be in the sword. And someone like Mick Jagger and the team has just a very specific routine before that 9 o'clock show. From the time the entourage arrives to learning a little something about the community that they're actually giving this talk to, this concert to, I should say, to exactly when they're going to dress, when they're going to do makeup, to actually someone like Mick Jagger actually practicing for 30 minutes vocals and for another 30 to 45 minutes warming up and dance routines in order to make that performance. Now, you wouldn't think that someone that was successful, that would be the case. But even in the creative arts, that becomes the case. And I can talk a little bit on some business examples if you like, but this is how important this is. And in today's world, we have so much information in our hand. We are being pelted with information, data, all kinds of contents, all kinds of things that disrupt us from actually doing things on a regular basis in stable environments. We're not going to be able to be successful in that way. And if it's about business and being a good entrepreneur and a good leader that starts a business, you need to be able to create that stable environment. Develop the routines and the policies and procedures that kind of become your culture, and then your business culture, and those become your rituals. So that's a little bit about that part. I've expanded a little bit for you, but I wanted to give you a feeling for how expansive the thought is.
And that was a beautiful metaphor, if you will, about the Rolling Stones. It's interesting because it's, amidst the chaos and the mayhem that we all see when they're on stage and what they're doing in the news, and are they throwing TVs out the hotel windows or whatever's going on there. The interesting thing is I've heard this. This is more than the second time I've heard that bands do this that are of that kind of caliber. They got there for a reason, right? There's reasons how they got there, and you're hitting on several of them. They have that routine down, and they have policies and procedures. They're doing step by step by step. It's crazy. Just today, I was looking around for something, and it came up on YouTube, and it was a Van Halen snippet. They do the exact same thing. They had this whole list, down to they want a bowl of M&Ms, and they say must take out all brown ones. I'm like, what? It's interesting. All the way down to the nitnoid details. How much beer they wanted. Yes, that was in there, and other things, and where they were to be placed. Isn't that interesting? They are another super band, very, very successful band. And so that's what I love to do, is model success and teach others to do the same. That is a business, by the way. It's a musical business, and they are that successful. You would think they're just these crazy run amok cats running all over the house and you can't hurt them. And here you go. You say they are everything but chaos before they step on stage, and then they bring the show. It's phenomenal. I love that.
Yeah. There's other. I tell a few other stories. For example, in business, my good friend Angel Martinez, who was the chairman and CEO of Decker's Brands, a Cuban immigrant caught in the middle of the revolution there, coming early to the Bronx to be with his some of his grandparents and family just to get away, learned, and especially when you talk about mind and body, learned how to survive and develop a routine of running. He ended up becoming a marathon runner, and that running routine, which was regular, had discipline and the sort, then served him very well for the rest of his life to be able to really lead teams in the area of Reebok, and then Deckers, which is Uggs and Hoka and those type of pieces. So we have a number of stories that kind of highlight the importance of that.
Excellent. Oh, man. I just realized the lower thirds had the wrong name. This is not Bart Smith. This is Dr. I. Dr. I. Angel Iscovich. Wow. I saw that. I was like, my goodness, what happened there?
I've been called Bart Smith before, too. So it's
I love it. Thank you for understanding. Oh, my goodness. There's so many things I want to ask you now that we've broken the seal, so to speak, on this whole concept of routines and regularity, and your book that's coming up. You are, by all accounts, a very successful man. You've gone through medicine, emergency physician. I can only imagine the stories that you have for that. And you were talking to me a little bit before the show about what you were discovering about human behavior. Would you like to touch on that at all during your days as an emergency?
Well, surely, I don't think I need to tell any gory stories here or the sort, but the point about emergency medicine that was really interesting was that it's kind of a moment of uncertainty. There's actually a lot of psychology about uncertainty and how we react to things that are uncertain. And surely the emergency department is that type of setting, if you understand it. But actually, what we did in the emergency department is that we were a team, not too different than the kind of teams you were talking about in your intro, and how it all has to work together to accomplish a goal. And even though we didn't know whether a trauma or a cardiac emergency or what kind of emergency would come through, we were very well organized. We had our routines down. We knew exactly what to do in each case. And that in itself was really an application of what I learned and what we're talking about today. On the other side was the patient's experience. People are not at their very best when they're injured, when they're ill. And so you learn really about those limitations and how to develop the right amount of empathy, how to have a good patient experience. And I think that kind of relates back now to business and how you deal with your customers, your clients, and the sort. So that's a little bit about the emergency department, what it's taught me.
Yeah, it's amazing how our life experiences can do so much to teach us to move forward, and everything fills, all that experience we can pull from to do things like you're doing, which is authoring and writing a book and share your knowledge and wisdom from your personal life experiences and from that of others that you've learned, like the interview with the Rolling Stones. I can't wait to read that. That's going to be phenomenal. Fantastic. So, as entrepreneurs, right, and successful people in general, we have to develop skills in order to get where we are. Would you agree with that?
Well, absolutely. And some of these skills, it's interesting, are actually personality traits. Right?
Mm,
What we're kind of born with. There's a little bit of genes involved there, and then in other cases, they have to evolve. They have to be learned or taught. Um, but they're very broad, and it depends whether you're leading a group of people or you're doing something on your own. I guess the term solopreneur comes about on
yes.
how to operate that. So I think that's correct.
So, if you were to come up with, say, three of the top skills, and maybe taking from your own personal experience, what would be three of the top, the ones that just float to the top right away, the skills that you have developed or you think should be developed for those trying to become successful entrepreneurs?
Well, I actually was surprised by that question because I hadn't seen it, Brian. But because sometimes it is hard to just pick out a few things that make a difference. But what I often talk about it when I talk about particular ways people are. Well, the first one is the ability to manage in the gray.
Mm,
What managing in the gray means is that you're able to have flexibility where you're not black and white about how you
mm,
approach a process or how you approach a business decision or an important strategic position. So being able to learn to manage in the gray and not to be overly formula is very, very important. It's important to know how to juke and jive, especially when you're starting businesses. So that's the first piece. The next one, which is in some degrees somewhat of a personality trait, but can truly be developed, is it's I don't know if I should talk about it here. We call it gas. Actually, I call it gas. Gas means give a
I
hoot.
gotcha.
Okay, uh, you have to be passionate. You have to be heartfelt about what you're doing, and the purpose and the meaning. Whether its end is merely just the end can't often just be financial. It has to be a belief in what it actually does and promotes in the world, and that's I think the second piece that I think is very important. The third, which kind of comes into routine and organization and structures that you have to develop, is the ability to connect strategy with um, finance, with budget, and then the ability to then execute to that budget. And many people can make, there's actually quite a few studies about companies that have, for example, incredible mission statements, and they develop a strategic plan and it meets that strategic plan, but only 2% are unable to execute it. That was a study actually done by the Rand Corporation on Fortune 500 companies. But even in a smaller entrepreneur level, the ability to develop strategy, develop the right goals, objectives, to then actually develop a budget that meets that need and execute to it. Be able, of course, to have to maneuver around it for any 1 year that you might do this type of plan. These are important. These are, I'd say, three very important aspects of in business and entrepreneurship.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. I mean, look how wonderful that rolled off the tongue. Three right away. I love managing the gray. It's like another term that we use to say it's kind of like being flexible. Be flexible in the moment. I love that. Gas, give a darn, and connect strategy with budget, and then I love how you added or kind of put the book into that, and then execute within the budget. So a lot of people, like reading is another example, right? A lot of people, I know some, that's why I say a lot of people, will read and gather information and do it as fast and as furiously as they can without implementing what they're learning. And that just, again, keeps them where they are. They are book smart. They've learned a lot, but if they don't put anything in action, it will never take them anywhere. So I love the word execute. That's what really jumped off the page when I wrote it down. Appreciate that. You've been successful for not just a short period of time, Angel. I mean, you've done several things, and each one of them successfully. And that's what I love about bringing people like you on the show is you don't have that mindset of, I'm going to go in for the quick kill, make my buck, and take off. No, I'm going to steadily over time continue to raise the bar and make this a long-term commitment to success, not only for myself, which would be you, but for those that you're helping, which obviously you got in the medical profession to do just that. And that's another reason I love you, man, because that's what you're about, is about helping people. What would you say, having done so, is the best way for folks to achieve long-term, lasting success?
Okay, so that's perfect, because you've got to bring me back to really understanding how we're wired.
Good.
Understanding how we're wired, like I like to say, from womb to tomb, because we're wired to this sense of routine and regularity. And this is very important for longer term success. I think you see this when one rears children and in care of the young. You begin to see how important it is to develop structure, routine, organization, to be consistent in what you do in that regard, and to also develop and have a stable environment. What happens when you're looking for, like you said, the quick kill, the quick short version to getting where you need to go, is that you're never able to develop a stable environment, a stable space, a stable community of the people that you work with in order to achieve something. So this becomes really a really important piece: sustainability, the ability to have something be consistent, of high quality, to deliver the same quality. Granted, sometimes you have to change what it is you do. You have to burst a little bit of your time bubble, bring new content in it. Is the ability to be in a very regular routine in any company or as a leader. So it's that sustainability. Today times have changed so much. It's so difficult. You don't have, for example, dynasties of sports anymore like you used to. The players are all moving for the best buck at the best place that you can. It's hard to develop a team that actually is able to perform and be consistent. Now, surely in basketball, the Golden State Warriors have done that and been able to somehow maintain that consistency in the sort. And they within them have their practice, their routines as you use sports. So, Brian, I think that today we're just being pelted with so much content that we are tempted to try so many different things, whether it's in diet, whether it's being vegan or paleo, and that we can't stick to really anything. And the way our bodies are, the way we began this world, the way we adapted is by being in a stable environment. We're very adaptable once we're in a stable environment, and our bodies get used to what it is we eat, used to what it is we exercise with. This is the case. So I don't know. I don't if that fits the piece, but I really think that's what's important. We're so interrupted and disrupted, and this is important. How you're going to be successful is to have an amount of discipline, not be willing to be interrupted and disrupted from your routines. That's a very important point to sustainability.
I'm glad you bring that up. I wonder if that's a contributing factor to, like, lately, now that the economy has turned somewhat and jobs are now much more available than they were, that there's a much higher turnover rate that's being experienced by companies. And I wonder if perhaps that is something they're lacking, is a structured culture, a stable environment with a community, a feeling of community. I just wonder. I don't know, but it made me very curious when you were saying that. Like, maybe companies should kind of put the brakes on and go take a look at that and realize, do they have what would keep people around longer, which is comfort, right?
Yeah. One of the things that I talk about is that good companies re-engineer themselves 3 to 5 years. They begin to look at what are their policies, processes, how they're doing, where their shortfalls are. And that's a really important point, the concept of re-engineering and looking at yourself. So, and furthermore, it's routines that kind of make a culture, whether it's like casual Friday in a larger corporation,
Yeah.
whether it's the right kind of ways that you shout out or the way that your CEO or others are accessible to you. This actually becomes part of your culture. But there's also a little bit of a generational piece going on here. People talk about millennials often
Yeah.
and how they do a great job, but like to explore. They have kind of personalities of curiosity and trying to find the right balance in as is the right mind body business balance, really exactly is what you're talking about, Brian. And so to do so, not all the environments fit that content of the routine that makes a difference. And so you see more turnover in trying to find those people. And if you're on the recruiting or looking for candidates, what we talk about a lot about millennials is make it a great environment. Even if they are moving to try something else to find a balance, if you've made a great environment, they'll be coming back to you.
Yeah, there's a great example that I learned just by asking one question. And there's a business called Trader Joe's. It's a grocery store, pretty prominent in California, certain areas of California, and it's a very healthy, like organic based foods and things. And it's a smaller facility. And I just remember going there quite often, and every time, no matter who I met that was an employee that I saw walking around with their shirt on, they never seemed upset, grumpy. They didn't look down at the floor. They looked happy. And I'm like, something's going on here. I don't know what it is. So when I got to the checkout stand, I finally asked that there was a young man there checking out. And he was just like all the rest of them, happy and outgoing. And how you doing? And I said, do you like your job? I already knew he was going to say yes. He goes, yeah, I love it. And I said, could you tell me what is like the main one thing that you love most about it? And he said, oh, yeah, absolutely. And immediately he had the answer. He said, you know what I'm doing right now? I'm at the check stand. I don't do this my entire shift. In fact, I do 4 different jobs every shift. I was like, this is genius. He's got variety built in every single day that he goes to work. I thought, I'm going to model that and implement that. And that's what I do. I have apprentices. They start out with one task, and I tell them, you're not going to be doing this task forever. In fact, it's not going to be very long. You're going to be cross-pollinating over to a task another apprentice was doing, and they're going to switch to yours and vice versa. And it really has made a big difference. People love coming to work. They love putting through the effort. They love, they just want to now be creative and put more forth, and they want to stick around. So I thought that was really interesting.
It's fabulous. And, companies that begin to develop those kind of cultures, that's kind of is their modus operandi. That is their routines. The routine is basically give them different content to do at different times of the day, but there's an expectation. There becomes a comfort, a relaxation. That's how we're developed. When we're in comfortable environments, we perform better, we feel better, and we don't stress out our system. So there's also a number, I often talk about circadian rhythms and how we're wired from the morning to have how our cortisol levels go up, and then what happens and where we can perform best. And good companies understand when their people are most productive. They understand the concept of circadian rhythms. If you're trying to whip somebody at 3 o'clock in the afternoon to work when our glucose levels, our cortisol levels are dropping, it's not going to be very productive. Those are probably really good times to get a little energy into your staff and sit around and talk about innovation and the sort. So we're really productive early in the morning for task and vigilance types of things. A lot of Excel spreadsheets, developing certain products or brochure materials. We're really great at engagement between 10 and noon. We're good on coordination after we eat. There's a little drop in blood sugar, but from 1 to 3, after 3 o'clock, the body's kind of gone somewhere else until there's another little peak around 5 or 6. And that's why the English have tea at 3 o'clock. And that's why Spanish cultures often take a siesta and open back up. So there's a lot to making a great business culture. And I think what we were explaining of Trader Joe's is one aspect. And this is another one about how we're wired and how we can best perform and produce.
And you so profoundly said it. The beautiful thing is, so a lot of people, I would assume when I hear routine, it's the same old thing every day equals boredom. But you just basically said and I'll paraphrase that, you can actually include variety into your routine and make it part of the routine.
Absolutely. It's just, that's the point about it. Routine is more about regularity, not so much the content. The content could be used to you or to your company and what you put in. You know, when you hear that term like, oh, we're having another routine meeting. Yes. You know what? If this is a routine meeting, just blow it up, okay? Because there's no point in having it. It means that everyone is not engaged. The information that's being discussed, the behavior that's happening is really not relevant enough. And you know, I recently talked to a bank executive who just wasn't having luck at his 3 o'clock meeting because everybody was in the doldrums. And he changed it to kind of 10 o'clock, changed the content to make sure that everyone who attended actually had some interest in it and that it touched them and what the work that they did during the day. And his meetings became very successful and production became better. So,
yeah, meetings they can suck the life out of every person that has to attend.
Yeah,
that's
true. And that's one of the other problems, you know, they call, you know, death by meetings, right? And when you have a larger business and you're needing to communicate appropriately, and you have these meetings that are standard or routine, they don't need to be that. The routine aspects do, but what you put in that content are very important. And, you know, really good companies learn how to allow people to have the time on their own to work and not always to have to engage with each other. I think I mentioned to you that one of the chair of CEOs, Bill Sanger of a Fortune 500 company that we interviewed, and I had the pleasure of working with him, you know, from 3:15, that moment in time, to 4:15, he took the time to just close the door, shut off all the social media, all the data, and just be able to think, particularly when there were important decisions where all of the sensory input kind of could just for a moment go away. So alone time is important. You know, yesterday, just as a point, I was at Direct Relief, where I'm very proud of having served as their chair and having kind of built a new building that helps send, you know, medical product across the world. And when they build that piece, they build little like phone booths, except there's no phone. They're nice, quiet spaces for people to go in and talk and have private time. So that's part of that culture, the kind of cultures you can develop.
I love it, love it, love it. Now, you've succeeded, again, in multiple areas. What would you attribute your success to? What are the things that bubble up in your mind that say, well, because I did these things, I am now at this level of success I've acquired right now, which is very high. What would you tell somebody who's listening and watching? What could they concentrate on that you did that helped you to establish this level of success you are currently at?
Wow, that's kind of a big question because I've done it in some very varied fields, and I don't know if they were all successful. I mean, part of it was that you don't always succeed, and you learn how to kind of get back up and learn from what you read, learn from what you do to really improve things. I think that when you talk about motivation, and I really believe that this concept, there's quite a bit of psychology behind having willpower, having discipline. But I think it comes back to, you know, again, what I've really am talking to in the book, and that is the importance of having a stable and familiar environment. Although I've changed environments often enough, I assured that they were environments that I could actually do the things and the disciplines that were important for those goals. And I think it's tough sometimes because it's difficult to stay in the same spatial environment, to have good community around you. It's what I learned when I studied 100-year-olds. They did things very regularly, but what they did varied, but they had a very stable environment. You know, you've heard of blue zones and people that have lived long lives in areas that have that stability. I think that's probably one of the points that's really helped me. And obviously, as I said earlier, I've had a kind of a caregiver approach. You know, I've always been the kind of person that if something's happening, I'm going to be there to try to make a difference. So.
And that's such an amazing quality about you. You know, you're there to make a difference, to help people. That's what I find most of my guests that come on. I think one of the biggest driving forces is helping people, and that is a beautiful, wonderful thing. That these are, you know, like you, the successful people in the world and they are using their success to help others. You know, ingrained in their success is helping others. It is because of helping others they're successful. It's an amazing, beautiful thing.
You know, we're social. We're social animals. We're convivial. You know, a lot of people nowadays say, "Hey, should I go into medicine? I heard it's really not bad. You can't make $1 at it. It's really difficult being a doctor, and you come out with such loans that you end up, you know." Well, there's some things that you just it's kind of a privilege to be able to take care of patients. There's a certain sanctity that's about it, and as hard and difficult as it might seem, but you know, to have had the opportunity to see a child with a ruptured spleen and to be able to put your hand into a splenic artery by doing surgery and to stop the bleeding, or to do something similar. I mean, this is these are experiences that really go to the core of what we are as human beings.
And on that note, kind of a high view philosophical question that's very personal. Dr. I, what makes you happy? What is it that makes you happy?
Wow, you know, that's a pretty you know, I always go back to the book because although somebody said, well, you're over routinized or you do things, I actually, you know, yes, I play tennis on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I do read my books in the evenings, in the later evenings mostly, and a little bit in the later afternoon. So, but I think the just being able to perform some of these tasks in themselves gives you meaning and purpose, and it gives you a certain sense of fulfillment. And I think if you're able to kind of give a message, and able to make a difference in other people's lives. Obviously, there's, you know, obvious moments of happiness that can occur, but I think, you know, Aristotle spoke really about what it means to live a good life, and to be virtuous, to live a good and virtuous life, and in that moment when, you know, you're at the end and can look back and say that you lived a good life. The thought of that definitely makes me happy.
Love it. Love it. Well, I cannot believe this. Every single time I come on this show, we go for an hour, and our hour is almost up. And there is one more defining question I would like to ask you, Dr. I, and it's kind of a deep question. And the interesting thing is, I'm just curious about what each individual who's been on the show prior, they've all been asked this same question. I'm always curious what people think about it, a definition of a word, which we'll get to in just a moment. But the thing is, when the question comes up in just a moment, if it takes a few moments, that's fine. You know, think about it. If it's instant, that's happened too, and that's okay. But before we do that, I would be remiss if I did not remind everyone and tell them how they can now qualify and to win a 5-night stay at a 5-star resort in Mexico. And this is not a thing where you go and you sit and watch a timeshare presentation. It is a legitimate vacation stay. And it is, again, sponsored by our friends at powertexting.com. So let's bring that up on the screen real quick so you can see how you can enter to win. There are two ways. One is go to the website. It's called themindbodybusinessshow.com/vacation. And there you'll see a form, and you just fill out that form, and you will be entered to win. Or if it's easier for you to do this, just grab your phone right now and type in the phone number of 661-535-1624, and then send the message with the word PEAK, P-E-A-K. And that will also enter you. So that's the word PEAK to 535-1624. And you have my permission to do this right now. Stick with us. If you're going to do it on a browser, open a separate tab so you can still hear and listen to the amazing Dr. I. And you're getting some fanfare here, Dr. I. Jackie Foster. Awesome, Dr. I. A bunch of exclamation points. So great to see here. Steve Thompson is giving you a shout out. Love you, Dr. I. So love this. This is phenomenal. So go ahead and do that now. Go ahead and enter to win that 5-night stay at a 5-star Mexican resort. And again, it's sponsored by our friends at powertexting.com. Go ahead and enter now. And we are going to return to the man of the hour, the man himself, Angel Iscovich, Dr. I. And so we're building this up about this one last question. And here's the thing, to kind of ease any trepidation that might be going on, which I doubt it. But the thing is, the interesting thing about this question, Dr. I, is there is no such thing as a wrong answer. It doesn't exist. It's just quite the opposite. The only correct answer is your answer because it's what you make of it. It's completely yours. You own it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure.
Are you ready?
I am. I'm waiting for an emergency to come through the door. Yeah.
Oh, not at all. All right, here we go. Dr. I, how do you define success?
Well, I think it comes back to a little bit of what I was saying. If you can live a virtuous life, a good life, you are a success.
Well stated. And here, interesting thing is I have asked this question of every past guest, and still to this day, I assume it's going to happen soon, but to this day, no two have answered it the same way. Is that remarkable?
No, that's fabulous. That's fabulous because I think this is what really happens as I've spoken about what you place in your routine. This is your individual content. This is the uniqueness that we have in life and what we make as goals and what becomes successful. And, for me, it's the ability to live a good and virtuous life. And for others, it might be something else. We're unique. We're here to make what we can of our lives. And I think all of your viewers, I know, can be successful at doing this.
Yeah, and especially if they follow your words of wisdom, for sure. And the other thing that's really remarkable about everyone's answer is not one of them, including you, not one of them named any of their top reasons for success that they thought, that define success for them as being money related. Like, I think I'll be successful when I hit my first 10 million, whatever. Never, not one. That's a beautiful testament to the quality of folks that come onto this show like you, who are here to help people, number one, and then live that, virtuous life and become pleased with what you've done with your time on this life. And so I so appreciate you for being on the show. I can't believe we're at it. It's time to stop the show. Unless everyone's okay, we can go another hour or two and talk more. I'm just kidding. Just to respect everyone's time, we will be back again next week with another glowing, wonderful show of the Mind Body Business Show. But for now, Dr. I, Angel Iscovich, thank you so very much, my friend, for coming on and giving your amazing value to our viewers. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right, everyone. Bye-bye for now. Be blessed. We'll see you next week.
Thank you for watching and listening. This has been the Mind Body Business Show with Brian Kelly.